This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium-bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets. Episode 167 from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. Now, you may be wondering, why is the playoff beard still here? Well, I will get to shaving that soon. The New York Mets have been eliminated from the postseason. Their season is officially over. The Los Angeles Dodgers are going to the World Series after winning the NLCS 4-2. This will be clean shaven. Well, not clean shaven. I'll clean it up a little bit. Let's leave it at that. I'll clean it up a little bit. But it was a busy day today at work, so I really didn't have time with that, putting together this show and trying to get this whole, season wrapped up here. Now, I don't know if you guys were a part of the spaces that I did alongside Mike Silva from Talking Mets podcast, but we did spaces. He asked if I wanted to do anything, during the postseason after, each game. And that was something that I was thinking about doing. I didn't know whether it was going to be a live stream. I didn't know whether it was going to be spaces or some kind of, podcast. But once Mike reached out to me, I said, you know what? There's a lot of people doing live streams right now. And, why don't we come right after the show, right after the game, go on and do a space. And that way we could chat with the people. We could talk with you guys in person. So it was a lot of fun getting able to do that each and every game of the postseason, starting with game 1 of the wild card series. So shout out to Mike Silva for jumping on with me for each and every single game and doing these spaces. And I really appreciated his participation and co-hosting with me and getting to chat with all of you guys, and hearing your voices was a lot of fun. Shout out to everyone in this chat right now. 32 of you guys to start the show. Got Maureen, Rosie K, Duran Rivera in here, Carlos Ortiz, Junior Swingman. Thank you all for joining this kind of somber day, I want to say. And if you heard me on the spaces, you got to be on X to do it. I know Ortiz is asking, how do you get involved with the space? You got to be a part of Twitter X, and you just have your notifications set and you'll see my spaces come up. I don't think I'm going to do one after every game next season, because it is very exhausting doing one of those, especially after the postseason games, which, most of the games start at 8, and then you're doing spaces for like 2 hours from 11 to like 1 or 2 in the morning. And then you got work in the morning. So I don't know if I'm going to do one after every game. I'm going to try to figure something out, a schedule of how I could do this. But during last night's space, or during the final game space here, I was a little bit indifferent about how this season ended. Now, I know this team went through hell and high water to get to where they were, to get into the postseason, slaying the demon of the Braves, going into Milwaukee, which was another house of horrors, slaying that demon, facing the Phillies for the first time in the postseason. But the Phillies have had hard number for so many years to get into the postseason, getting through that demon, and then getting into the NLCS, eventually losing to the Dodgers 4-2. It was an amazing season. I think Howie Rose said everything that you want to hear to calm you down about this loss. And I agree. I agree that this was a great season. I agree that, this team provided us with so many special moments throughout the entire season. And you can talk about OMG. You can talk about Seymour Wiener. You can talk about Rally Pim. You can talk about Grimace. all the outside stuff that happened, all the fun things that happened during the season, and then you talk about the in-game play coming back from 0-5, having that awful May, and then going on that run from June 1st on where we were the best team in Major League Baseball to get into the postseason, having that no-hitter stopped by Francisco Lindor, who was on his way to an MVP-type season, coming back after being hurting his back. We didn't know how he was going to come back. A lot of people were like, oh, man, David Wright, deja vu all over again. Francisco Lindor hits that game-winning home run to send the Mets to the postseason. Then you have the game-winning home run from Pete Alonso in the 9th inning in Milwaukee. Then you have the game-winning grand slam from Francisco Lindor in the Phillies series to seal up that deal. So many great moments. But I will say this. I will say that I was a little bit sad, a little bit disappointed, because let's be honest here. And I don't know if you agree with me. You let me know in the chat if you agree with me that these opportunities do not come often, especially for this franchise. This does not happen often. Now, I know David Stearns is looking to change that, and he will get the opportunity. This is his biggest offseason because everything has changed now. It's no longer this team is looking to get into the playoffs. It's the team has to get into the playoffs, in my eyes. This team has to get back to the NLCS next season. And how are they going to do that? So this is a big offseason for David Stearns. Plans have changed now. Carlos Mendoza said it in his post-game presser. They expect to be back there. I expect them to be back there. You, Mets Nation, expect the Mets to be back not only in the postseason, but in the NLCS at the very least. Because as I said, these opportunities do not come often. We've seen it in the past. We've seen it with our own eyes. 2006, they come so close. That was the last team that I 100% believed would win the World Series. And they lost in 7 games to an inferior team in the St. Louis Cardinals. And all the talk after that was, yeah, this is disappointing. But you know what? We'll be back. We'll run it right back. And guess what happened? 2007, 2008, they blow division leads. They don't even make it into the postseason. 2015, the beginning of a new era, the rotation of young kids that was supposed to lead us to a championship. Kansas City did it the year before, right? They lost in 7 games to the San Francisco Giants in the World Series. They win it the next year against the Mets. Oh, the Mets can do that. They got youth. They got a lot of homegrown talent. What happens to that team? They get to the wild card, but they lose it. Barely get to the wild card because all injuries. See, you can't replicate all these things that are going to happen in a season and expect it to happen the next year. Especially now with this team, which is going to be totally revamped, most likely new. We're going to have a new rotation. They're going to have to revamp the bullpen, and the Mets need some bats. They have a lot of money coming off the books, and a lot of things are going to have to take place for this team just to get back into the postseason. We're all going to expect them to be better than 89 wins, and it's not a guarantee. Look at the team we just lost to. They were far better than what the Mets put out there. They had 3 MVPs at the top of the lineup, and one of them was hurt. Not to mention they had no rotation. This is a Dodgers team that ran roughshod all over us this series. You think next season, when they get to be 100% or they spend on another contract and they do some kind of loophole deal like a Shohei Ohtani, that they're not going to be back there? They'll be back. You're going to have to get through them. The Phillies, they will revamp and they will be back. The Braves, they were hurt. They will be back. The Nationals are up and coming. You got the Padres still out there. So there's no guarantees that this Mets team gets back. And that's why I was disappointed. That's why I was frustrated. Because this was the Mets' opportunity to take advantage, especially of this pitching staff that had no starters. You went into Game 6 with a bullpen game and the opportunity to face Walker Buehler again in a Game 7. Now, it's not totally the Mets' offense's fault because, the pitching was just not good. Not good at all. We're going to get into what went wrong in this series. We're going to get into the positives of this series as well. There are some positives to take away. But I'm just saying that, and you could disagree with me, but I'm just saying I couldn't fully last night get into, well, you know what? We'll be back again next year. And they're going to play a lot harder. We just don't know. So anytime an opportunity like this lands in front of your feet, you got to do whatever you can to take it and get to the World Series. That's all I'm saying. I want to get to some of your guys' comments in the chat here. Appreciate every single one of you that are in here right now. Rosie K saying, I think that it's going to be really hard for the Mets to get back to the playoffs with the Phillies and Braves and the Avengers out west, which are the Los Angeles Dodgers. Yeah, Rosie K, just like as I was saying, as much as the Mets were kind of one of the healthier teams in this postseason. Outside of losing Brooks Raley earlier on in the year, and Daniel Nunez, which really hurt the bullpen. Outside of losing those guys, everyone else was pretty much healthy. Had a healthy rotation. Lindor was back to being Francisco Lindor. The only one that was really dealing with a lot of pain, and you could tell, was Brandon Nimmo, who could barely play outfield and run around the bases. But a lot of these guys were pretty healthy. And like I said, the Dodgers definitely weren't healthy, and they ran roughshod all over the Mets. Junior Swingman saying, this was the most fun I've had as a Met fan since 2006 and the most disappointed I've been since 2007. I agree. Actually, it's the most disappointed I've been since 2006, because that was heartbreaking for me. It was as fun as 2006 and disappointing for me as 2006, and you all guys all know why. Maureen, a good fan of the show, a good friend, even checked on me last night in the chat in a private message asking if I was all right. I appreciated that. She says, no more LOL Mets, and she is correct. This team played so hard and played so well this season that I feel like that LOL mantra is gone. So many moments this team had, so many comebacks. They felt like a family. And I talked about this in the last offseason, that if the Mets are going to attract free agents here in the offseason, Steve Cohen's money is not going to be the only thing that's going to get them to come here. They are going to need to change the perception of this team. They really are. And they did. They became winners this season. And the deep run into the postseason showed that. You saw in the celebrations, the emotion. Everyone that's been on this team talks about how they loved playing here. We never had that in the past. This organization was a laughingstock. It was a joke. That's changed. It's changed. Great stuff, Maureen. Junior Swingman saying, in my heart, I felt like this was the year we win it all. It felt like a championship caliber team, especially after what we did in the summer. This team was special, 100%. 100%. And that's why it hurts so much right now. Obviously, we'll be getting over things, right? We're going to look back fondly on this season. But I don't just want to look back fondly on what could have been. And the engine that just couldn't get to the end of the finish line. I want to look fondly on a championship team. I haven't seen one yet. I've said it in the past. I was born 2 weeks after 86, so I only know watching video and YouTube clips of those teams and how much they're loved here. I want my own team now to celebrate. Duran Rivera saying, I thought it was going to be like 2019 Nationals, who started poorly and won the whole thing. It was getting close. It was getting close. But here's the thing too now. The postseason's a whole lot different than it was in 2019. Now you have an extra layer, an extra step that you have to go through when it comes to the wild card. And I'll say this about the new playoff format. I don't want to hear anyone complain anymore. Any of the top teams complain that they didn't have a fair shot, that they had too many days off, all this, all that didn't help them win. You got the New York Yankees and you got the Los Angeles Dodgers. The two top teams in the postseason, in their respective league, are in the World Series. So I'm done hearing this, oh, well, we had this many days off. Oh, no. Prepare better. Rosie K saying, I think that the Mets have the personnel in place to ensure that they'll be competitive. I agree, but I also need to see it to believe it. We believe in David Stearns because of what we've seen in Milwaukee. Now, maybe it gets taken to a whole nother level because of the fact that Steve Cohen has the money to do it, but I still need to see it. I need to see it with my own two eyes. I need this team to make more than 2 postseason appearances in a row, because that's all we've seen, right? They did it in 99 and 2000. They did it in 2015 and 2016. And that was it. They didn't get multiple postseason appearances in a row in 2006 or 69 or 73. 86 had that 1-year gap to 88, just like 2022 to 2024. I need them to be making consecutive postseasons in a row. And I mean more than 2. I need 3. Now, Rosie K says, I hope that the Mets invest in pitching because it killed them in the series against the Dodgers. I 100% agree. And we will definitely be talking about this in our future episodes. This episode right here is just to recap what has happened in this National League Championship Series. I don't want to delve too far into what's going to happen in the offseason. We will get there, I promise you. And we will do shows about it. I want your input into it. We will get into it. But at the moment in time, I am still in this sort of reflection mode, still trying to come with the cope that this team is not going to be playing in the World Series this year. It sucks. Shout out to my guy Shea Parking Lot, also a part of the Spaces the other night. Appreciate him being a part of that. Appreciate him being a part of this podcast. Appreciate you all taking part in this podcast. Duran Rivera saying, Mets starters in beginning of the season hardly ever went 5, which killed the bullpen. And in the second half, Mendoza pushed his starters to go longer. And maybe it caught up with the staff, especially Manaya. See, this is why I did not have a problem with the way Mendoza was running the pitching staff and trying to get them in line so that they could pitch more innings at the end of the season. I didn't have a problem with it. It did end up hurting the bullpen, but we saw the fatigue from our starters. These are starters that have not pitched that many innings in their previous years. So this is new highs for them, or they're coming back from injuries. They were pushed to the limit and they gave it their all. And that's all that matters. Shea Parking Lot saying, we got hot when we needed to, but we weren't as hot as other teams that got hot. We need to come back solidified. We are not going to get those late innings theatrics again. Yeah. What happened this season, don't expect to be repeated next year, right? Even the aura around the team, the OMG, you can't run that type of stuff back and expect it to work again. It's just not how baseball works. So, like Shea Parking Lot says, no offseason talk yet. Let's reminisce, and we are going to do exactly that. And we're going to recap this series here for the NLCS and what went wrong. What went wrong this series? And you could start off with the pitching staff. They walked 42 batters in this series. 42 in a 6-game series. You ain't winning doing that. Not against this offense. And you look at the Dodgers offense, they scored 46 runs. 46 runs they scored. "46 runs is wild. And I look at the offense here. Tommy Edman absolutely killed us. There's always one Met killer that is not one of the main primetime players like an Ohtani or Freeman or Betts. And that was Tommy Edman. Batted .407. Had 1 home run. Had 11 RBIs. Out of those 46 runs, 11 of them came off the bat of Tommy Edman. You look at everybody else who hit. Mookie Betts batted .346, 9 RBIs. Max Muncy, he only had 4 RBIs, but he's batting .333. Shohei Ohtani batted .364, 2 homers, 6 RBIs. Chris Taylor batted .375. The only top hitter that did not hit in this series was Freddie Freeman. He batted .167, and he's dealing with a leg injury or an ankle injury. I don't know, maybe an ankle or foot injury. But You got destroyed. And Freddie Freeman had no part in it. And he's a Met killer. Another reason why the Mets needed to take advantage in this series. And they couldn't do it. Just like Rosie K said, it felt like Mets pitchers were throwing batting practice, because it did. Check this out. Game 1 of this. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. You go through the scores of this series. Here we go. Game 1, the Mets lost 9-0. Game 2, they won 7-3. Game 3, 8-0. That's 17 runs right there. 10-2 in game 4, they lost. They won game 5, 12-6, but they still scored 6 runs. And then they lost game 6, 10-5. 1, 2, 3 games with double digits of scoring. Actually, I'm sorry. 2 games for the Dodgers with double digits of scoring. We had the other one. But they scored 9 and 8 and 10 and like, what? You can't have a series like that. The bullpen needed to be so much better. It just needed to be so much better. Ronald in the chat saying, we didn't have enough to compete in a 7-game series with the Dodgers. It is what it is. We don't have to like it, but that's the story. I mean, what can I say to that? What can you say to that? Right? He's right. He's right. Now, you look at the Mets pitching staff and the starters, they got tired. The bullpen was unhelpful. The only 2 guys that really helped in this series was Ryan Stanek and Edwin Diaz, who was shut down. I don't think he's got a run off of him. It was like the old Edwin Diaz was back. And he came in the 4th inning, pitched the 4th and 5th inning, I think it was. Or was it the 5th and 6th? One of those 2. But he did 2 innings, and he shut down the Dodgers. So thankful for that. Stanek, he pitched well. To a certain extent, we got the old Reed Garrett back. Definitely for most of the season, the postseason, April Reed Garrett came back, and that was delightful to see. Where the Mets got killed was in a guy that I thought was going to really light it up for them in the postseason, just like Stanek. That's what they brought Stanek in for, but they also brought Phil Maton in for the same reason. And ever since Phil Maton had to pitch 5 out of 6 games to get the Mets into the postseason, he was absolutely gassed. He was awful in the postseason, and especially in this series. His off-speed stuff was not working, and no one was falling for it. It also didn't help that Jose Budo turned into a pumpkin. I like it that I love Jose Budo. He was one of my favorite pitchers this season. And it just sucks that he just didn't have it. After that first game where he pitched 2 shutout innings in Milwaukee, he didn't have it. So much struggle from this Mets bullpen. You just look at the ERAs. Jose Budo, 6.75. Reed Garrett, 9.64. So this was a little bit of a tougher series for him because he gave up 5 runs. But, Phil Maton, 4.91. He was a lot worse than it shows. Tyler McGill got lit up to the point where they're like, you know what, we're just going to leave him in and let him get beat up. Same thing with Danny Young, 7.36. The Dodgers were not falling for any of the Mets' tricks in this postseason. Junior Swingman saying Maton throws 88 miles per hour batting practice and he refused to use the bottom part of the zone. I mean, I don't disagree there. The bullpen was just bad. No help. And once the score ran up to 5 or 6-0, the Mets offense, they weren't capitalizing. And that was another problem with the New York Mets of what went wrong. How many runners they stranded on base. You guys all saw it every game. Game 1, 5 left on base. 0 for 3 with runners in scoring position. Game 2, 10 left on base. 4 for 12 with runners in scoring position. Game 3, 8 left on base. 0 for 4 with runners in scoring position. Game 4, 12 left on base. 12. 0 for 10. Come on. Game 5, 8 left on base. But they were 5 for 19. Still not a lot. Game 6. You want to talk about game 4 where they left 12 on base? Game 6. And they still scored 5 runs in game 6. 13 left on base. 2 for 9. Carlos Ortiz saying 2 bases loaded situation and nothing to show for it. I mean, you see all the info that I just put out there, right? I mean, look at that. They left as many men on base as the Dodgers scored runs. This would be a whole totally different series. And maybe Junior Swingman is right. We had this series and we beat ourselves. Rosie K saying the Mets offense struggled all year. They were either very hot or ice cold. It caught up with them. Also correct. That leads to also Shea Parking Lot's comment. Pete was still swinging at that garbage outside on October 20th. So it wasn't just the pitching. It was the offense as well that kind of, did not come through when they needed them. And they couldn't outscore the Dodgers. Now, I like what Ronald says here. We didn't have a real number 1 starter all year. Sean did a great job as Sean Manaea, but he isn't more than a number 3 at best. Sevy a number 4. The starters were serviceable, but not in a 7-game series. They ran out of gas. Now, I think that Sean has gotten to that maybe 2-3 kind of starter, especially with the new arm slot. Just look at the stats of how they won games behind him. Sevy, when they brought Sevy in here, I thought he was a 4. I think he's a 3. But it's what the Mets dealt with, which is fatigue. That's another thing that went wrong. Manaea and Sevy went past their limits of innings pitched, of, getting through these games. They were tired. Manaea was tired. By the time he left game 2, it was a wrap. Sucks. But that's how it was. Brandon Nimmo. We talk about fatigue. Brandon Nimmo was playing on one leg. He was compromised the whole series. And I'm surprised that they allowed him, one, to continue to play in left field and not put Jesse Winker out there, not let him play DH. Another thing was when this team was down 8-0, 9-0, 10-2, they never took him out. Mendy kept him in there. If I'm going to have a critique about anything from Carlos Mendoza, It's how he handled Brandon Nimmo, who was playing on one leg. And then you have playing JD Martinez in games 3 and 4 over Jesse Winker. I think Jesse Winker in the lineup during this postseason, the Mets were 6-1 and were 1-4 without him at the time. You saw they brought him back in game 5 and the team totally changed. JD Martinez is just done, right? Like I think he's just done, as a player. I think he's going to retire. But yeah, so many things. Some things probably preventable from the manager. And I think Carlos Mendoza is a good manager. I think he did a great job this season of holding this team together, especially during the tough times. But there were some questionable moves during this playoff series here. And not saying that that's something that's, fireable from, because I saw some of that on Twitter and on X. That's crazy talk. I think he is a good manager, and I think he will lead this team pretty well. But there were some interesting moves. None more interesting, obviously, than putting Kodai Senga as the game 1 starter. And he probably did that because, as we go back to the fatigue, Sean Manaea and Luis Severino were tired. And you were hoping to at least get 3 innings from Kodai Senga, right? I mean, he was okay. He gave us the 2 innings in Philly, and you're like, oh, man, with extra rest, he'll give us, 3 innings here. Didn't even get out of the first, or barely got out of the first. He just didn't have it in game 1. That ultimately ended the team and kind of started the downward spiral in this series. You saw him come back in game 6. He looked the best in I think it was the bottom of the 7th when they brought him in. That was the best he's looked. And then obviously in the bottom of the 8th, he gave up a whole bunch of runs. They probably should have just said, okay, good. We'll see you for 1 inning. Thank you. But there you have it. I mean, those are the problems that the Mets have had. Shout out to Johnny Boy, who is in the chat here, getting ready to cut off his playoff beard just like me. He was upset last night, but today he's proud of our Mets. Yes, I agree. Like I said, I was not feeling it last night. I feel better today. And this is always good for me. Coming on here, talking to the chat, having you guys in the conversation, talking with the Met fans, talking with Mets Nation is something that I've enjoyed doing all season long, especially my first season live streaming and having you guys be a part of this chat. So I really appreciate everything that you guys have helped me with this season, getting through this season, which was a tough, long season. But I appreciate all of you guys. We also got Jeff Cohen in the house. Appreciate him for joining us. He was a part of the spaces last night and for most of the games in the postseason. It was great to talk with you, Jeff. Appreciate you being here. Shout out to Shea Parking Lot, who's got to leave, and he's got work. It's a late night for my guy. He's got work. So appreciate him being a part of the show. Rosie K saying the Mets are very differential to vets. It costs them. Yes, especially with JD Martinez. Yes, but I do think that they, for the most part this season, they knew when to pull the plug, especially David Stearns knew when to get rid of players. I mean, like, do you guys remember Adrian Hauser? That was the beginning of the season. He ain't with the team no more. Who else was on the team? Joey Wendell, right? Like all these vets that were on the team that didn't do well, he got rid of them. Maybe he did also leave Jose Iglesias in for too long. It looked like Jose Iglesias was starting to fatigue himself as well. Maybe it was time to give Jeff McNeil a start a game sooner than he went with. But Who knows? And Maureen's right. Maybe JD Martinez will retire. Let's now transition. We've talked about all the bad stuff that happened with this team. Let's take a look at the positive takeaways from this postseason. One, Mark Vientos and his continued power stroke in the postseason. This series, 3 home runs, 7 RBIs, was huge. It was huge. He is a huge part of the future of this team. And to me, he automatically gets first dibs at third base. I think he played an adequate third base. It wasn't always great, but he's proven that he could play the position. He worked with Francisco Lindor, which I'm pretty sure he's going to do again this offseason. And they worked on his defense. And he did well. He even did well in the postseason. He's got an arm. I don't know if you guys seen some of his throws, but he's got an arm. Way better than what we've seen from Brett Baty. And who knows what happens to Brett Baty? Maybe he gets traded. I don't know. You also got Ronnie Mauricio. But I think that Mark Vientos, after what we saw in the postseason, I think Mark Vientos is the real deal. And I think he will be the third baseman next season. I really do. Jeff Cohen saying Vientos was very impressive and he played well throughout the season. Yeah. I mean, you could not have asked anything better from Mark Vientos. Not only did he have that power stroke, but a lot of his home runs were in big clutch positions. Do you remember Pete Alonso? If you check his average with runners in scoring position, with the bases loaded, wasn't good this season. You look at Vientos, on the other hand, who was a clutch player. Very clutch player. Maybe Carlos Ortiz saying Vientos would have won the NLCS MVP. Maybe. Might have been. 3 home runs, 7 RBIs. If they could have got it to game 7, he even kept the Mets in game 6 after they were down 6-1, hitting the 2-run home run. When he did that, I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe they have another comeback, especially against this bullpen. But alas, it wasn't meant to be for the Mets. Another positive, Jesse Winker. Everything we wanted and more. How many times did I talk to you guys about trading for Jesse Winker? And I really wanted Jesse Winker on our team so he would stop pestering us. But I knew him coming off the bench or being a platoon player would be a positive for this team. And ever since he hit that home run, that game winner, on I think it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday, he has been so good. Batted .385. Had over a 1 OPS. I don't know about you guys, and I know I said I'm not going to talk about the offseason, but I want Jesse Winker back. I want him back. Pete Alonso is another positive takeaway. After and I mentioned it earlier, a few minutes ago, that after all that went down with him this season, unable to come up with big clutch hits, struggling, probably his worst regular season. He hit, over 30 home runs. He had close to 90 RBIs, and it still wasn't that great of a season. It was his worst one outside of 2020, which is a shortened season. But during the postseason, 273, and during this series, 273, 1 home run, 4 RBIs. He had 5 walks. I know we talked about him swinging at sliders in the dirt, but he played very well in this postseason. Came up with clutch hits, clutch home runs. Game 5 in the first inning, a 3-run home run to get the Mets started. pretty clutch during the postseason and definitely helped himself when it comes to the offseason and getting, the most money he can. Now, I don't think he is going to get what he thought he would when the season began. And it took a big turn that, he wasn't going to get the money and then some. But now after the postseason, he may get a little bit of money here. Another positive here, Francisco Alvarez. I don't know what it was that Carlos Mendoza told Francisco Alvarez, but whatever it was after game 3, after he was struggling, after everyone was calling for him to be benched, Francisco Alvarez hit .412 in this series and had an OPS of 947. Turned it around. Just happy for him. I don't think anyone really wanted to see Luis Torrens start a game here. I don't think he would have provided anything outside of, being able to throw runners out at second. So I'm glad that Carlos Mendoza stuck with him. And he had a good game 4, a good game 5, and a good game 6. And that's something positive for Francisco Alvarez to go into the offseason with, knowing that in the biggest games of the year, with their backs against the wall, that he did everything he could to get them through to game 7. My final positive is the team did not give up all the way to the end. When we were down 3-1 going into game 5, I said, all you got to do is win game 5 and don't allow the Dodgers to pop champagne and celebrate on your field. I didn't want that happening, and the Mets made sure that it didn't happen, and I'm forever grateful for that fact, because how many times in Citi Field's history have we seen teams celebrate, whether it was the Royals in the 2015 World Series, whether it was the Padres in the wild card round. I didn't want to see it anymore, and I'm glad that the Mets stuck to their guns, played hard, and pushed it to game 6 where the Dodgers had to win it at home. And even game 6, the Mets scored 5 runs in game 6. That's supposed to be good enough to win a game, right? 5 runs is good enough to win a game. If the pitching was any good, then maybe that would have happened. Maybe that would have happened. But thankfully, the Mets did everything they could. They pushed and pushed as hard as they could. They just lost to a better team. And you want to lose to a team that's the best in the league. You don't want to have what happened to the Phillies, what happened to Milwaukee, what the Mets did to them. You don't want to happen to you, because now the Phillies now are rethinking everything. Milwaukee rethinking of another missed opportunity because they lost to a wild card team, the 6th seed. So the Mets should be proud of their season, proud of what they've done. This is not the result we wanted. But It's what's happened. And now I feel free of this game, of this series, and we can move on. We can move on and start moving in the direction of 2025. Let me get to some of your comments here. Ronald saying, coming this far, the Mets have no reason to be disappointed in how the season came to an end. The bullpen was always the main problem. They still won 89 games and 16 over 500. Every season is different. I don't know if I read that one before. I may have, and I apologize if I did do that, but, shout out to Ronald with the comment. I had a comment from Carson and then I lost it. I don't know what happened. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, here we go. Carson, it's hard to get angry when they fought the way they did. I remember being beyond embarrassed with how 2022 ended when they face planted into the playoffs. This team gave us something to be proud of. I could not have said it any better than you, Carson. Great comment, man. And it's true. 100% true. I mean, 2022 and 2023 were some of the most frustrating times of watching baseball as a Met, right? Like the 2022 season, we were like, wow, this team can go far. And then they had that bad September. And then they had the bad October. And then it spilled into 2023. And that stank we could not get rid of. And then 2024 happens. And, like Carson says, we got to be proud of it. Couple of comments on Jesse Winker here. Winker could be our DH next year. That's a hope, right? DH backup outfielder is a possibility, right? Because you like that kind of depth. Johnny Boy is saying, yep, Winker, he's the fire we need. And I want Pete back. He's a Met man. We'll see. We'll see if Pete comes back. Like I said, we're going to get into the offseason in a little bit. In a couple episodes, we're going to do that for sure. Carson saying Winker's approach needs to be amplified across that entire clubhouse going forward. The guy was so locked that he was spitting on pitches against the left-handed pitcher in Banda yesterday, who's been insane versus a left-handed hitter. So yeah, he had a great at-bat against Anthony Banda. And you want that approach, right? Even in Game 5, I feel like his approach, his patience at the plate kind of fed off of the other team, whereas they didn't strike out in Game 5. I don't know if you guys remember that, but Game 5, there was not one strikeout of the Met. It was a complete offensive performance by the New York Mets, and it was very great to see, man. It stinks that this team is not going to be going to the World Series, and we are now stuck with Yankees, Dodgers. Now, who do I want to win the World Series? I could care less. I'm not watching the World Series. I don't want either team to win. So I ain't going to be checking out the World Series. I'm going to be doing other things. I'm going to be watching Only Murders in the Building. I'm going to be watching some hockey as well and start preparing us for the 2025 season. We got a big off season ahead of us. Very big. Rosie K saying you sound much better tonight. Yes. I sound better. I feel better. Not only because I need time to process these things. And sometimes after games end, probably not the best time for me to comment. And it was just the way I was feeling at the time, And the fact that I get to chat with you guys, even talking with you guys, by the end of that night, I was feeling a little bit better. Definitely for sure. Maureen saying the Mets have nothing to be ashamed of this year. They fought hard, but fell short. But they gave us fans so much fun this year. It was a lot of fun, guys. A lot of fun from this team this year. And a lot of fun hopefully coming. Carson saying Rangers Devils at the top of the Metro right now. I think we'll be okay for the time being now. Yep. Both of our teams. I know Carson, huge Rangers fan. As you can see behind me, I'm a huge New Jersey Devils fan. I have a hockey show called Total Hockey Now, which you can catch with my co-hosts Adam Bernard and Chris Moraes. You can check that on YouTube. It's every Thursday. If you like hockey, check it out. Every Thursdays at 5:00. Rosie K saying Stearns had Uncle Stevie's checkbook next year. He sure does, and we'll see how they use it. And we'll see how they use it and who they use it on. A lot of free agents, a couple of big ones out there, but we got to be realistic too. I know a lot of people during the season were talking about Juan Soto being definitely signing a contract here. I don't know if that's for certain, and I'm not going to get into that until we get closer to that offseason when the World Series is over. But I'll say this, and I want to put up this one last banner here before we wrap up the show, and that's this. Thank you for supporting the Subway to Shea podcast throughout this entire season. This was the first season that I really got into doing this live stream thing. Now, I'm not the greatest when it comes to talking by myself. I don't feel comfortable doing it, and I don't know if you could tell. I get a little nervous, and even at right now, I this is not normally something that I like to do. I'm trying to get used to it, and you guys help out a lot being a part of the chat and putting your comments and questions in and allowing me to vent as well. So, I always like to have a guest on, but I said, you know what, let me do this one by myself today. I'm pretty sure we'll have more guests on, especially in the off season. We're going to have tons of guests on. I had a lot of writers on. A lot of them have become good friends of mine. And I had on Nelson Figueroa and a lot of my other content creator friends. I mean, Carson is in the chat. Ibby and John from Till Mets Do Us Part, the Shea and Sons podcast, Mets Weekly, everybody that Wardy. I mean, everyone that I've collaborated with. So many. Talking Mets, Mike Silva. There's just been so many that I've collaborated with. And I can't, whether it's the content creators, any of the guests I had, and especially you guys that have supported the Subway to Shea podcast, whether it's from the beginning, whether you just latched on to the show and are now a part of the fun, thank you. Thank you for just being a part of this on YouTube, whether you listen on Apple and Spotify, whether you talk with me on X, that I'm always open to conversations, always open to talk with y'all. And that's what makes this fun. I'm as real as I can be as a New York Met fan, and I'm going to give my opinions to everything that I can. And I shout out to all of you people in here. Johnny Boy saying, Ant, you're awesome. You made this season awesome for me, Broham. Thank you, man. I appreciate you. And Johnny and me met this year. We met this year on another show. And it was great talking with him throughout the season, and having him come and be a part of Subway to Shea as well has been awesome. Maureen, Jeff, Lane Kerner, Carson, Carlos Ortiz, Duran Rivera, Junior Swingman. There's been so many. Yuki Matsui, Ronald, all of you people. Rosie K, everyone. I could go down the list. Shea Parking Lot, everybody that's been a part of this. This has been a fun season. Quick note on what's going to be happening. I'm going to be taking a break for this World Series. Like I said, I'm not going to be watching it. I'm not interested. I can't watch these two teams. I can't enjoy these two teams, and I won't. I won't allow it. So once the World Series is over, going to come right back here. We're going to do a review of the entire season as a whole. We'll take a look at some of the best moments that this team has had, talk about some of the best performances, and then we get to work. We start looking at what this Met team will do in this offseason, what this team can do this offseason to not just make it to the playoffs. No. That is done with. That is now has to be a guarantee in my eyes. That is what David Stearns needs to be working on. Not only getting us to the postseason, but getting us back to the NLCS. What is he going to do to get us back to this night next year, where we're in a contention to win the World Series? It's not only making the postseason now, it's now getting to the World Series. And that's what I want this team to do. So we're going to be doing that over the next couple of weeks, but we're going to take a little bit of a break here. It's probably going to be just about a week. I mean, depending on how this series goes, who knows whether it's a 4-game sweep of either team or it goes 7 or whatever. We're just going to take some time off. Honestly, to be honest with you all, I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted from this season. I had a just a little bit more energy to make it to another week. But now that it's over, a break is needed. A break is needed. Not a long one, probably about a week or so, but a break is definitely needed. But like it says down here, thank you for supporting Subway to Shea. Thank you for being part of the Subway to Shea family and for being a part of this show each and every week. I hope to have more guests. I hope to have more fun with y'all and more things coming down the line. You can follow the Subway to Shea podcast on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me personally on X at Rivera86, as well as subscribe to the podcast if you want to listen to it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and on YouTube as well if you want to watch it. And I didn't say this the entire show, but do me a favor. Once you leave here, share this video with your friends that are Mets fans, family that are Met fans. Like the video, make sure they like the video. Let's get this video up there in the rankings so that people can watch and subscribe. So make sure you like, subscribe if you haven't done so. Thank you so much, everyone. That's a wrap on the 2024 postseason. We will do a wrap next episode on the entire season as a whole. But until then, let's go Mets. And always remember, you gotta believe. Good night, everyone.